Hi there, Grace.
Hi.
So this is great to have you here. I really appreciate you giving me some time, or us some time. This is a reflection on History 300. Grace Conway has been through the course and did very well from memory. I can't even remember, Grace. I'm assuming you did well because you normally do well with things.
Yeah, that one was my David Uniapon.
Oh, yes.
Mythology and
a good essay. Yes. So, yeah, I've got Grace here as the first of a number of interviews I'm going to do for History 300 students, interviewing past History 300 students to get their take on the course, strengths, weaknesses, advice, and so on. So thanks, Grace. And my first question is, well, how did you actually find History 300 as a course overall? How did it treat you, whatever way we want to frame that?
It was a course I enjoyed doing, but it was quite complex. It's introduced a lot of things that I'm still working through.
Okay. We're all working through them, probably. As a practicing historian, we're still working through them. Can you give us an example of one of the things that introduced you to that you're still processing?
I've always been I'm not a feminist. I don't like feminist perspectives, all those sorts of things. We should all just be equal and it shouldn't matter and we don't need to do it. And as you probably know from my last essay, which was written from a feminist perspective, I'm very much working through that, the concept of why it's important to specifically focus on women and those, despite all my anger about it, that we need to.
But we do need to. You're
right.
Yeah,
and so it's something that that's something that the course I'm slowly getting to 2 years later, that I need to respect that and examine that.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean that's something then that you've taken into your own journey as an emerging historian. Can you point us to anything else that you got out of the course? What other things might you shopping list, if you like? I'm not one to do it, but yeah, what sort of other things did you get out of the course?
One of the big things I got from the course was that history matters in our daily lives. So it's really easy to understand why history matters on a big picture, worldwide sort of scene. We can see why we need to acknowledge that, but it also matters in our day-to-day life, and that was something that the early kind of topics in the course really brought home to me, that how we think about the past and how we interpret the past affects our daily lives.
Yeah.
And I guess on that kind of similar, that how history is done matters. That we can agree or disagree with an author, but that doesn't necessarily make it good or bad history. That there's a lot of things that go into writing history or presenting history. It doesn't necessarily have to be written, but just because it fits with our perspectives doesn't mean it's right or good.
Okay.
And that no one historian is really going to get all the aspects right.
Yeah.
That when we're looking at a topic, that we have to kind of read widely and outside the box a little bit, because no one's going to have, really good historical method matched with a feminist perspective or a Indigenous perspective. But you have to kind of get it from everywhere a little bit, like that. Pretty widely.
that historians need to be transdisciplinary is the technical.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of my big interests, and it came out a bit in the course, but one of my big interests is where can we get history from? Like in my last essay for you, I wrote about in literature, but TV, all sorts of places educate us about history, and they're just as valid if they've got a good starting base. And this taught you how to assess a starting base.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing that the course did, was that it gave me the confidence to say, yes, this is well researched, or they asked the right questions, or it gave me the confidence to say, yeah, I understand the historical method, or historical consciousness, which are kind of fuzzy, strange words that are hard to define. And it helped me personally with my reflexive, being reflexive on my work, and reflecting about where I think, what matters to me, and where I am positioned.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's great. So, I mean, as the person who designed and delivered the course, that makes me very happy.
I enjoyed it. It was.
There. So, let's turn it around. So, what did you struggle with in the course?
There's a lot of information, and a lot of it's quite daunting. It kind of you kind of have to go across philosophy but then go to sort of Elton's rigorous examining the evidence. So yeah, there's a lot to take in, and I find it really difficult to voice my own opinion. And so it was hard to sort of say, oh yeah, I can understand it all on a philosophical or practical level, but this is where I stand.
So finding your voice, that's an interesting one. And of course, this is a third year course. It's kind of like the capstone course, if you want to call it that, for the history major, though you can be doing it as a minor, or you can even be doing it as an elective. Occasionally we'll get somebody coming in that way. But finding your voice is something about maturing as an academic, or as a scholar, or as a disciplinary expert, however you want to define yourself. That's where you're at, isn't it? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to do that after so many years of and being taught that everything needs to be backed up, and realizing that you do have a voice. And that's, I guess, the positive in it all. You've always had a voice. What you've picked to put it, to include, and all of those sorts of things have always been your voice. It's just the standing out on your own a little bit.
Oh, wonderful. And of course, that confidence is, it just comes with, I guess, a maturity, or maturing into your discipline, and saying, yeah, I actually have read a lot about this, and I actually do have a feeling. It might be a gut feeling that then you have to try and give form to.
Yeah.
But it's that journey from, oh, I'm not a feminist, to, okay, actually this stuff really does help us understand the lives of women in this time, or whatever it might be.
That's it.
Relationships, those are things that do take time, because we don't give ourselves time. Study so often is about, the next assessment, and this is one of those things where you say, even 2 years after having done History 300, you're still working through the ideas, because we need time. One of the good things about being old, is that, I've spent a lot of time working, thinking about this stuff. My opinion goes like this and like this. And of course, I'm exploring, because I'm just horribly curious person. I want to find about.
And then I spoke to you about this earlier in the year. I'm pretty sure one of the readings that was in the course when I was there talked about the idea of historians of each generation need to revisit all the questions, but really each historian throughout their life needs to revisit the same questions, because we change, but also the world around us changes. And looking at it from those different perspectives is important.
I mean, in many ways, the world around it changes. We can find a new letter from somebody or other, or we can find something else, or it might be archaeological, or it might be DNA. It could be anything.
But also public opinion changes. And I think that, again, this is something I wrote about a little bit in my last essay, the idea of societal understandings change, which puts a different perspective on the past.
Feminism in the 1970s and 80s was angry and bolshy and everything. Of course, that means that you would have, even though you're not old enough to remember the 70s.
I was born in the 80s.
Yeah. So, you still have that sense of, I don't want to be like that.
That's it.
I want to be an angry girl. But the ideas, the discipline of feminist thinking actually have enabled you to see the world more fully.
Yeah, and those ideas in the 70s are just as important, like the kind of, well, what were women really doing? Are valid perspectives,
yeah,
take into account.
Yeah,
I think.
So one last question for you, Grace, before we wrap up. What would be your advice to new students in History 300?
I would suggest pick your areas of fascination. It will be a little bit overwhelming if you do all your readings, do all the things that you have to do, but pick where you're going to go in deeper.
Yep.
Because you can't do it every week. And it's a lot of new information, so you kind of want to a little bit.
Yeah, so that's good advice, because I'm the course coordinator, so I can say, look, your final assessment is a piece of research that you choose to do in your area of interest. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and so focus on that.
Yeah.
I kind of had two in my final, like mine was, I looked at mythology and good history.
Yep.
I don't know if they're still the topics, but but they were when I did it. But just it's too easy to try and include too much, because most of the topics do need to be considered in everything you do.
Exactly. That's great. I mean, Grace, thank you. Anything else you want to say before we say bye?
No, I think I've talked enough.
All right, well, I want to thank you so much for giving us this time. I thank you on behalf of all the students that will be having a listen to this.
Thank you.
And I just wish you well with your studies, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.